Hi, I'm Gwen Lattin. I'm Director of Laboratory Research for Agalita Marine Research Foundation. And we have our lab facilities here at the Sea Lab in Redondo Beach. We want to thank the Sea Lab for allowing us to hold our different classes here. What I'm going to talk about today is plastic pollution in the ocean and kind of give you a history and background of what we do. In the picture here, you'll see that the guy in the water is Captain Charles Moore. He founded Agalita Marine Research Foundation, and now it has changed its name to Algalita Marine Research Institute, but he founded it in 1994. And then in 1997, after he had a research vessel built, he actually started doing research out in the ocean. At first we were doing kelp restoration. Then when he was on the Transpac race to Hawaii in order to test out his boat, he decided to take a different route home. So he went north of Hawaii and he went over towards the coast. Every time he came up on deck, he saw plastic in the water. And this disturbed him. So he came back and he did some research. He found that other people had actually seen different types of plastic or recorded plastic out in the Pacific Ocean, but he didn't know how much was out there. You know, it wasn't in the area that he was actually looking at. So he designed a trip to go out and actually look in an accumulated area. So with this research vessel, it's a 50-foot catamaran, 70-foot mast, and these are some of the things that he found in one of his voyages in 2008. So with all the things that he has done, he's done different modifications to the boat. He's put on solar panels. He's got all the up-to-date electronic equipment. And it's powered mostly by sail, but he does have two twin Yanmar 75 horsepower engines that if there is no wind, he can still travel. And in looking at what was going on out in the environment and trying to understand what was going on, why plastic might be out there, he worked with Jim Ingraham and Curtis Ebbetsmeyer. And this was the model that they came up with. If they released plastic from the coast of North America and from Japan. And the blue dots that you'll see and the red dots will always stay there, but you'll see where they'll go. After a half a year, they move a little bit offshore, and you can see that they move in various areas. After a year, you can see with the currents, a lot of the stuff that's coming from California or North America is going below Hawaii, but the stuff that is coming from Asia is going directly across in the ocean. After 3 years, it makes it all the way across the North Pacific. After 10 years, you can see that there's an accumulation starting in this area here and in this area here. So plastic is going around the ocean, but there's like 2 accumulation areas and a superhighway in between. After 20 years, you can see the path of some of that plastic. It never really makes it to land, but it stays out in the ocean and it breaks down. So when Captain Moore actually went out and did his study, they went out to the study area, what they call the accumulation zone. Some people have termed it the garbage patch. And you can see why, because of the currents that they just showed. Of the 8 trips that we've done, I've shown you the first 6 up here, we've always gone out, 1, ask a question, is there plastic out there? Yes, there is. The next time we went out, we not only wanted to say, are there new sampling sites? We asked that question. Yeah, there's still plastic out there. But each time we went out after that, we tried to do something different. Is it at the surface? And is it in the depth of the water? Then we looked at trying to say, all right, we understand that there might be some type of toxins associated with it, accumulating on it. Let's study that. That's persistent organic pollutants. We collected samples, and Dr. Lorena Rios analyzed those samples for persistent organic pollutants. We also helped NOAA deploy tracking systems to track some of the big bolus nets that were out there. So each time we go out, we do something a little bit different to try and add to our base of knowledge. This is what a manta trawl looks like, that we take our surface nets, our surface samples. It's towed behind the boat, off to the side, so it doesn't collect the plastic from the wake of the boat or what the propeller might stir up. The ones that are taken below the surface are taken with a bongo net. And with a bongo net, you can actually see that there's a caught end. The net is 1/3 of a millimeter mesh. And this is what the caught end looks like when the net is stretched out in the water. All the sample gets concentrated in that end. And the when it comes up, we then turn the caught end inside out, and this is what one of the concentrated samples looks like. We then rinse it off into a container, and you can see how much plastic there is. There are nurdles in there, there's different fragments, and mostly out in the open ocean you will see fragments because it's photodegraded and broken down into smaller bits. There are still sometimes different things that you can see that have identifying marks on them, but that's what you'll see more closer to shore, or if something has fallen off a vessel in the, a very recent time frame. But we bring it back to the lab and we analyze it, and since we're looking at things down to 1/3 of a millimeter, we have to look at it under a microscope. So you can see that there are several different pieces of plastic here that are the same size as the plankton. Here's a piece of plankton, here's some plankton, here's some sort of an insect that was on top of the water, and here's another example. Here's a small fish, but there are lots of little pieces that are the same size as plankton. So when we bring it back to the lab and we look at it under the microscope, we then sort it by size and type and categorize it, and then we archive it. So we have our quantification, and when we first started out, we started in the accumulation zone in the study area, and as time went by, our study area grew. We just recently finished a trip from Japan to Hawaii through the tsunami debris field, and we're now analyzing those samples in the lab. And what you'll see actually when you're looking at the water samples like we have here, a lot of it is the same. There's a lot of fragments that have been out there in the past. There are a lot of fragments that may have just broken off, but anything that was larger on the surface may have been moved and dispersed by the wind. It's not in one centralized area. So up to 2008, this is the area that we're sampling. And you can see the different years of the different study sites. We color-coded them so that we're trying to get more and more samples from, in order to give us a better picture of what's going on. But it's not only out in the ocean, but it's also on the shore. This is a slide by Dr. Richard Thompson showing different pictures all over the world of where debris is actually on the shore. So where does it come from? You know, it comes from watersheds. And so it comes from inland, from high in the watershed, down through rivers, streams, and street drains. We've done a study in 2003, plastic debris, river to the sea, with different types of sampling equipment. We did dry conditions. Here again, we're using a manta trawl. We're doing light rain conditions. We're doing stream bed samplers, small nets, in order to try and collect debris from all different areas, because the water flows at different rates down the different channels because of just the nature of water when it's moving past different objects. Also, we collected in heavy rain conditions. We used different types of sampling equipment. Here's another type that we were using. But what are the impacts of the plastic in the environment? Not just the marine environment, but on land too. Here is a snapping turtle called Mae West. She is alive and living in Florida. She's not very big, but this is an example of when a turtle actually crawls through a piece of plastic and it gets impinged on them some way. It can restrict how they grow. Same thing in the picture, with the jellyfish. It gets entangled, and that might inhibit from actually trying to eat. But the impaction is not only on just animals, but in man. It costs us thousands of dollars each year in boating. This is a perfect example of line getting stuck around a propeller. This is exactly what happened to Captain Moore about 2 months ago. A thin piece of monofilament fishing line got wrapped around his impeller. It worked its way up the shaft and got caught in the bearings of his engine. Cost him thousands of dollars to have that taken apart, and had to replace the bearings because they got clogged by that line. Also, it affects tourism. Nobody wants to go and visit someplace that is impacted with plastics on the beach. But what's interesting is, when you're looking at organisms, you have to think of different stages of the life of the organism. Here is an albatross, an adult, feeding the chick, and this might be a typical breakfast for the bird. It has different types of pin caps, floating buoys, cigarette lighters, plastic rings, and it might have some natural food. The adult is out there flying all around trying to collect food for the chicks. These birds only live on the islands out in the middle of the Pacific or down off Guadalupe. And they have a wide range that they have to travel in order to collect the food. They bring it back to the chick